All right, so hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about wheel throwing, just to kind of change things up. So I'm going to make a demo video today, and we're just going to kind of go over some of the basic steps with wheel throwing. Today I just want you to follow along. Other days I'll have worksheets and step-by-step stuff so that you guys can kind of know more of the steps, but today we're just going to be going over some of the basics. And we're going to be focusing pretty much on tools and what tools are being used for. So this is the potter's wheel. I have one in my basement. You've probably seen them in the classroom, and they're in the back. And the potter's wheel is just like another way of building. So we've done slabs, we've done coiling, we've done pinch. So the wheel is really just another form of making. The wheel has its benefits. You can make things a lot quicker. If you've seen some of my stuff or you've seen me throw on the wheel, something that might take 2 weeks to coil can be thrown in a matter of 20 minutes. Now, you might be thinking, well, why aren't we making everything on the wheel? And that's because wheel throwing takes a ton of time to get good at. It takes a lot of practice. And I'm hoping that when we get back to school that you will have a chance to at least sit down on the potter's wheel and try it. So I'm just going to start talking about the wheel, talking about the tools, and then each day I'm going to try to do a different demo on a different thing. So today's just going to be the basics. Tomorrow might be bowls or cups or plates. I haven't quite decided. A couple things. On the wheel, this is called a bat. And what a bat does is it goes on top of the wheel so that when you're done, you can easily lift your piece off without having to pick it up because it's going to be extremely plastic. I have a ball of clay already wedged up and ready to go. It's in the form of a sphere, which is always the starting clay, or some people sometimes throw with like kind of a cone shape to start. I like a sphere. And then I have my wheel. So there's a foot pedal on the right. I'm not going to show it to you because I really can't pick up the camera. My hands are covered in red clay. And it's just like a foot pedal for anything you've ever driven before, a go-kart, a car, and farther down it goes, the faster it goes. In the middle it goes medium, and then back it is stopped, just like any other pedal. So the first step for throwing is going to take your clay, find the center of the wheel, which you just have to find the center, and you just take your clay and you press it down. This is the first step, which is called dry centering, and all I'm doing is patting the clay down to make sure it is stuck to my wheel head and it doesn't go flying off when I spin it, because that would obviously not be good. You want it to be as close to the center as you can with the dry centering part, because it's going to make centering a lot easier. I've been throwing for a while, so I don't really spend a lot of time on dry centering, but if you're a newbie and you see a part that's really off center, just want to push it towards the center. That will make all the more when you are centering with water. Okay, so the first tool that is going to be probably your main tool, which is kind of funny because you don't really use it a ton in ceramics, I think, is more of your throwing sponge. I have two types of sponges. I have my elephant ear sponge, which we've all seen, and then I'll have some tools that are kind of designed for throwing. This is called a throwing sponge. And all it is just a sponge that fits in my hand a little bit better when I'm throwing, because this one is a lot bigger. So you'll see me go in and out of these. Sometimes I won't even use this one. It just depends on how it's all going and what I'm throwing. But I'll be using this one mostly. So one of the main things you're going to be using is water. So water is going to be making everything on here fluid so I can throw with it and make it into any shape I want. Today I'll be just throwing a cylinder. Maybe I'll make it into a vase, probably something like that, just to start. I'm going to take my sponge and get some water on it, and I'm just going to cover my piece with water. I'm going to cover my hands with water because you want them to be slick when you're throwing. A couple things about my posture. I am as close as I can to the wheel. My elbows are on my thighs, so they're not moving. They are one. And I'm holding my hands as steady as I can, because that will keep it from centering. The first step is to cone it. I'm going to be bringing all this clay that's like bouncing and off center, and I'm going to bring it straight up. And you're going to go a little faster. for centering. And I'm just bringing my clay into a cone-like shape. My pressure is at 3 o'clock. My left hand's really just guiding the clay. My right hand's putting the pressure. And my left hand's just kind of keeping it in check. So I'm just bringing it up. Into a cone-like shape. So what that does is I'm taking all this clay that's off-center and bringing it up. There's a little bit of stubborn clay down here, and I have two choices. I can spend another 5 minutes taking care of it, or I can get rid of it. I probably can bring it up a little quicker than 5 minutes, so I'm going to try. I'm just going to bring it in so I have more clay to throw with. Okay, so before I bring it down, I'm going to do something. I'm going to take my potter's rib tool at 3 o'clock, and I'm just going to get rid of some of the stubborn clay. This is clay that becomes harder to center. It takes you a lot longer. And then the bottom of my piece looks a little bit more straight. I'm just bringing it in and up into a cone-like shape. Okay. The next part is bringing it down. And this is the centering part. So all the things I'm doing right now is to get the clay centered so that I can throw with it. If it's off-center, it becomes extremely irregular and extremely difficult to throw with. So centering is probably the most important part. My right hand's going to be on top. Notice I have my sponge in my hand because if I need water, I squeeze. And you'll know when you need water because it won't be as slick. And my left hand's doing a lot. It's catching it. So my pressure's at 6 o'clock. Squeezing when I need water, and my left hand's catching the clay. Until I get all the way down to the wheel head, okay? The idea is that this is not really bouncing, almost like when the wheel is stopped, it looks the same as if the wheel is spinning. That's how you know something is centered. I'm going to bring it up again because I'm trying to make a vase, and this is kind of low to start with a vase. It's kind of more of a plate. I went a little low on it, so I'm going to bring it back up, which is good because you get to see the steps. And I'm not going to talk through these ones because throwing can be tough to talk through, so I'm going to let you guys just watch for a second. Okay. So what you just saw me doing is a bunch of variations of techniques that I've learned over the years. The main technique is always this technique, but sometimes I put my hand here and I put my left hand and I go up and down my fingers just to get anything that's off-centered centered. And then before I open, because my clay is pretty centered, it's good enough for the moment, I'm going to take my potter's rib tool at 3 o'clock, get rid of any clay. And some people don't, but you know, I think for a demo it's important for me to clean up my wheel so that you can kind of see as much as you can. Red clay is a pain because it pretty much stains everything, but it is a nice clay to throw with because it holds its own a lot better. Okay, so the next part I'm going to do is opening. So I'm going to open my form. Everything after centering is pretty much at a lower speed because if you're going too fast and you make a mistake, it'll be almost virtually impossible to fix and you'll have to start over. So I'm going to put water back onto my pot. I'm going to put my sponge down, and what I'm doing is I'm finding the center of my pot and I'm going to press down and open up my form. It's going to be hard to see. Hopefully you guys can see as much as you can. I just take my hands, press down to start, and I'm going to have to make a little well. So my well needs water so that my fingers can glide down. So I'm just going to press more. And you have to know when to stop. So you can kind of tell by putting your finger in here and then kind of finding the base. You know how thick your base is. You also can stop the wheel And if I can find my needle tool, this is my needle tool. I can press down, put my finger to the base, and then pull out, and I can see how thick my actual base is. You don't want it to be too thin because you want to leave some for trimming, which we'll talk about another day. And now I'm going to open. So I made my little well. Now I'm going to start pulling at 3 and 9 o'clock to pull the clay open to start making the walls of my form. Okay, so now I've opened my form. One thing that you're not going to be able to see, you just have to kind of to imagine it, is I'm going to compress my clay at the bottom. I'm just taking my sponge, holding it at 3 o'clock and going across the base of my floor. It's important to compress your clay because the clay is going through a lot right now. It's going from plastic to leather hard to bone dry rather quickly because things are going to be consistent. And you want to make sure your clay particles are nice and compressed so that you don't get cracks. So I'm just compressing, and all I'm doing is just pressing down, making sure all those are nice and compressed. Okay, now comes the throwing part. So my left hand's on the inside, my right hand's on the outside, and I'm going to start kind of pinching the clay very subtly though, because you don't want to over pinch, you'll go right through. And I'm going to start pulling up my clay. It's important that your hand speed mimics the wheel speed. So if I went really quickly and my wheel was going slow, I would have a lot of waves in my pot and it would be inconsistent. So you want to make sure that the wheel spins enough times so that it is a consistent wall. Okay, so that was my first pull. So I'm bringing the clay up. It's going to get taller and taller. A couple things that to keep in mind is making sure that you don't go too thin with your throwing, that you keep your walls nice and consistent, and that you take your time. Sometimes I hold my breath because if I make the wrong move, it's all over, and all that hard work that I did is done. So I'm going to do another pull. Okay, and you can see that the clay wants to go out. Because the wheel's spinning, there's something called centrifugal force that you might have learned about. So the wheel's pulling the clay out. So it's my job to make sure I'm pulling almost at an angle or that I'm collaring my pot back in because bowls are one of the most common things made in ceramics, probably because bowls are the easiest because the wheel wants to turn everything into a bowl. So it is your job to make sure you bring it back in. So I'm going to bring the clay back in, and this is called collaring. And all I'm doing is pressing slowly so the clay goes back in, and I can get a taller form. Okay, so that's good for my next pull. I have quite a bit of clay, so I want to make sure I get the most out of it. Okay, and I think I can get one more pull. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. Now becomes the shaping. So you have to understand that if you want something tall, you need a lot of clay. Or you need to be a really good, really skilled thrower to get the most out of your clay. So I've gotten pretty much as I feel comfortable getting out of this clay. Because the thinner you go, the more risk that you take. So, after you throw your clay, you have a nice cylinder. Then comes the shaping. Okay, you want to make sure you get all the water out of the pot because water, remember, is your frenemy. in ceramics. It is something that is necessary, but it also can kind of make the clay become weak. And I'm going to compress my rim because it's a little wonky, but I'll show you some tricks to get rid of that when I am done. And now I'm going to start to shape things. So I'm going to actually bring this in a little bit. And I'm going to throw with that clay later. I'm collaring it in. And then I'm going to take my hand and start to push out at 3 o'clock to give my pot a nice belly. So I'm just pressing the clay out. This is why it's important to leave some clay, because if you press out a pot that's too thin, you will have a collapse. So at this point, I'm not actually throwing, I am just shaping. I'm not trying to get it to be taller, I'm just trying to get it to be wider. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that, and I'll show you some tricks to even make it look better. I'm going to color my neck in. Okay. And then I'm going to throw that clay that's up here. To give it some shape. And I'm actually going to trim my rim. I got to look at my proportions. I want to make sure things aren't too wide. I'm going to take my needle tool at 3 o'clock and I'm going to trim my rim to make it a little bit more even. Okay, so now my rim is flat. And then the other tool I'm going to start using now is my metal scraper tool, which is a godsend when it comes to throwing, because it is going to give you that nice clean shape. As we know, we use the metal scraper tool to clean up our form. It's no different here. Okay, wipe off all that slip. And I'm trying to make sure my pot is nice and even. I've been throwing a while, so if I don't like something, I will not keep it. So sometimes I spend an extra 5 minutes at this stage to clean up my form and decide. You know, you can carve at it, attach things to it, form it. You can make it from a round into a square to an oval, but you have to like it, because you're spending a lot of time on the work that you make. And in my case, you know, I don't want to put anything out there that I am not particularly loving. Okay, so I'm going to get to my rim. Flare it out a little bit more. It's a nice little vase. And then I have, it's called my 15-in-1 tool. It's a tool designed for throwing. It does a lot of different rims. So I use this quite a bit to get a nice even rim. It's a nice tool. There's a lot of tools in pottery that are designed for just throwing, that make throwing just a little bit easier to do. Okay. And then I'm going to use my modeling tool. So when we use our modeling tool, we use this side mostly, right? But in throwing, you use this side quite a bit. And this is what is going to give me a nice foot at the bottom. So I'm just going to, at 3 o'clock, use it. Almost like a knife. Because sometimes it could be hard to belly things out too quickly. You'll get something that bellies out and then it collapses because it can't support itself yet. So this is a nice way to trim some of that bottom clay off that's being supportive right now and make that shape just a little bit better. You know, sometimes when you guys make designs, you know how I'm always like, oh, that's probably too big of a belly too quickly. And that's why throwing, you see some of those forms, like you didn't just come up with them. And coiling can be quite difficult to get some of these forms without holding some things to help kind of hold things in place. But throwing is a great tool to do that. Okay, I'm pretty much done. I'm just gonna go back in here and clean up a couple things. So today what I want you to do is I want you to think of one question for me about the throwing process and attach it to this assignment for the video so that I can answer any questions that you might have about throwing that I might have not answered. And then you're gonna have some more throwing demos this week, and there's gonna be a couple worksheets, very, very easy stuff, just so that you're following along and knowing the steps of pottery. But today, all I want you to do is think of a question that you might have for me about the potter's wheel and throwing that I can answer for you. All right, I hope everyone is doing well, stay safe, and I hope you enjoyed this video. All right, see you guys.